Welcome to Wellness Fixes the Pod, a by Maven media production, where we believe you deserve real education from real experts delivered in a way you can actually use. I'm Dr. Kelsy Vick, your board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy, and this podcast was built for the girl who is done feeling overwhelmed and frustrated by conflicting health noise and is ready for something she can actually trust. Every week, we have honest, science-backed conversations about your health, your hormones, your brain, your body, and everything in between. No fluff, no fear-mongering, just the truth. Because understanding your body is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself. A table full of experts built for the curious girl who wants the truth. So welcome. Your seat is waiting for you. But suddenly, that player can't feel his legs. It's not that the athlete has forgotten how to play. His brain just pulled the plug on the exact system he needed in this high-pressure moment. She just can't tell the difference between a bear running towards you and a penalty kick or a public speaking event. A study done out of Stanford found that stress hormones can cut prefrontal cortex activity by up to 50%. So when you notice that pressure spike, if you feel it physiologically with an increase in your heart rate, name it. The people who choke the hardest are often the most talented. Picture this, the 90th minute penalty shot with 60,000 people watching you, holding their breath, watching a player who has taken this shot in practice 1,000,000 times. But suddenly, that player can't feel his legs. It's not that the athlete has forgotten how to play. His brain just pulled the plug on the exact system he needed in this high-pressure moment. Today, we find out why. We sprinkle in a little bit of the World Cup and performing under pressure, but this also applies to pressure in our day-to-day lives. Welcome back to Wellness Fixes the Pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsy Vick, a board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy. And I often find inspiration for these podcast episodes based on current events. And with the World Cup going on, and actually the game last night that I watched got decided in penalty kicks. So this performance under pressure episode that I had planned is coming at the perfect time. And I was wondering how our brains, our bodies handle that pressure and why in some moments we tend to thrive and in some moments we might choke up a little bit, even if it's something that we have practiced thousands and thousands of times. You might feel this in a sport, or you might remember feeling this in a sport, or you might even feel it before heading into a major talk or public speaking. So today we're going to chat about the science behind performing under pressure. And next week we'll go over some of the ways and science-backed ways that we can utilize within our brains and bodies to help us better perform under pressure and override some of the systems at play that might cause us to choke. So let's understand what actually happens in our brains when we sense a high pressure environment. So we have two main characters, the amygdala, which is our threat detection center. We've talked about the amygdala before, and then we also have the prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of those higher level decision-making skills. It's that planner, it's where decisions are made. It's also where our working memory is stored. So the memory of how you used to perform a task is stored in the prefrontal cortex. It's the mental note-taking document or notes app that we use to write a plan and then figure out how to execute it. So in a high-stakes environment under pressure, our amygdala starts to sense that as a threat. It reads high stakes as danger and pulls the fire alarm, sounds the alarm system, which floods our system with these stress hormones. It's not that the amygdala is evil. She's doing what she's meant to do. She thinks she's saving your life, but she just can't tell the difference between a bear running towards you and a penalty kick or a public speaking event. So when the amygdala sounds the alarms, the function of the prefrontal cortex can drop dramatically. So our ability to plan and execute our working memory, that system in the brain starts to drop once the amygdala sounds the fire alarm. So your planning and working memory goes a little quieter during the times you need it the most. A study done out of Stanford found that stress hormones can cut prefrontal cortex activity by up to 50%. So this is where an athlete or your friend might say, I don't know, I completely blanked up there. They're not entirely wrong. So when it comes to the group chat and maybe what we think of as the mean girl in the group chat, The amygdala is just freaking out a little bit. It's sending signals that we are under attack in some way, even if it is just a penalty kick or a public speaking event. The prefrontal cortex is the girl who always tends to back her up off of a ledge and start to calm her down. Although tonight, the prefrontal cortex left her phone in the other room. And so the amygdala is just going off in our group chat, sending the alarms in all caps. I know we've all been in this situation before. It's just fun to tie it back into the World Cup and see this play out in real time with someone else. It's not as fun when we experience it ourselves, but something we can do is we can name it to tame it. So when you notice that pressure spike, if you feel it physiologically with an increase in your heart rate, name it. Say, that is my amygdala, not an actual emergency. She's typing in all caps to the group chat, and the prefrontal cortex might have left her phone in the other room, but it's my job now to step in and calm her down a little bit. Naming the response switches it from the alarm system to more of the thinking brain and takes a little power back from that alarm. It is the first and maybe simplest lever to pull, and we'll build on it a little bit more in part 2 that we'll do next week. So now that we understand a little bit of what's happening in our brain, we can now understand why choking is not necessarily a weakness, but it's a working memory glitch. So for simplicity's sake, let's define choking as performing worse than your skill level, specifically related to that high pressure environment. It's not that you weren't ever good or you didn't have the skill set. It's that pressure causing the amygdala to freak out, which causes a quieting of the system that you rely on during these situations. Your working memory gets flooded with worry, so there's not as much mental bandwidth left for the task to remember how you used to perform it, to rely on that muscle memory, even if it is a kick that you've taken thousands of times, a speech that you've practiced multiple times. You also start overthinking because of that pressure. You start consciously monitoring a skill that typically runs on autopilot. The counterintuitive part is that the people who choke the hardest are often the most talented. High stakes has a way of hitting the high performers. Research on choking and working memory found that pressure reduces performance the most on tasks with higher working memory demand, and that it is often the high working memory individuals who choke the most, because pressure starts to consume the very strength of what they typically rely on during high pressure situations. The overthinking part of it also has a name: explicit monitoring. Paying so much attention to a movement or skill that should be automatic that you actually disrupt the automaticity of that skill. That is why a striker who has scored 1,000 times can suddenly start to think about how his foot actually works and kicks the ball, and all of a sudden shank it. The autopilot was better than the manual controls. So the second little takeaway we can get from today that's a precursor to next week is we need to externalize our focus. We have this concept in physical therapy as well. We call it an external locus of control, where if we have someone focus on their form too much internally, if we say, bend your knee to 90 degrees, that's more of this internal focus of control. Where if we say, bend your knee towards that wall, that's shifting their focus to an external locus of control, and it actually helps improve their ability to perform the task. The same happens with this. We want to externalize our focus so that things that are supposed to be automatic can stay automatic without us overthinking it. Giving your attention a small outside job keeps the overthinking brain from taking control. So all of this system, this pressure, high stakes environment that causes our brain and bodies to do funny things can affect us as women differently than men. It's the same alarm system, but slightly different wiring. Our sex hormones shape how the stress response plays out. And that means the pressure moment can look and feel different for us as women. Estrogen amplifies the effects of oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which we've covered this before. So under stress, we as women often go towards this tend and befriend side of the stress response in addition to the fight or flight that we're used to. So we like to increase that connection or bring other people in when we experience a stress response, alongside the fight or flight that's also happening within our bodies. So we can use this to our advantage. That hormonal response that happens within our bodies as women and that need for bonding can actually help decrease the alarm. If we bring people in when we start to feel that pressure or that high stakes environment, that's actually feeding into some of the wiring that benefits us as women, especially when it comes to high stakes environments. We've talked about this 10 and befriend theory before, but it comes out of UCLA. And we talked about it when it came to friendship and female friendships. So I'll leave the link to that episode below in case you are interested in learning more about that. But it's a really cool study that was done out of UCLA that talked about when women reach for social support because of our internal hormonal wiring. Our heart rate lowers, our blood pressure lowers, our cortisol output is better regulated. I won't necessarily say lower because we want those peaks and valleys. So it's just better regulated when we reach out for connection. Estrogen enhances oxytocin's effects. So the calming payoff of connection can be bigger for us as women. Now, a little caveat to this, hormone levels shift throughout our cycle. So this science is still trying to catch up to understand how we might experience these things throughout different phases of our cycle. But it's cool to start to understand where women might be able to put into action some of these things that optimize how our physiology actually functions to handle those high stakes, high pressure environments. There's still a lot to learn, but that's why I also love talking about it here on the podcast and sharing new research and sharing it in the Smart Girl newspaper. That way we can stay on top of what's new and interesting and fun for all of us as women to learn as women's health just starts to keep pushing and pushing boundaries, and as women's research and women's sports science researchers and all of these wonderful women we've had on the podcast keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible for our understanding and knowledge of female physiology. All that to say, our bodies are built to co-regulate. Borrowing calm from a friend's nervous system during our own high pressure, high stakes experience can be a real measurable strategy to help us perform better under pressure. So build your pressure people. If we can name it to tame it, and then if we can bring others in, whether that's through a group chat with our friends or someone who's in the room with us during that experience, those are both two ways that we can help better override our threat detection center, take the reins back in our control, and feel a little calmer so that we don't choke or overthink when that's the last thing we want to do during a high pressure moment. Quick pause, because if learning that your brain literally dims the lights under pressure made you feel a little more normal, I'd love for you to first follow, subscribe wherever, so that next week's episode you can also learn about the actual action toolkit that we're going to use to help us better manage pressure. That way all of that comes straight to you. But also send it to a friend that you think might benefit from learning this about her own brain or body, whether or not she's got a big presentation or game or experience coming up that you think she might be under pressure for. Send this to her. I'd love for other girls to understand what's happening in their brains and bodies when they are under pressure. And this was just a fun way and time of the year to talk about it with the World Cup going on. Next week, we're going over the actual toolkit too. So I think that will be extremely helpful. And after you've shared it with a friend, if you have 30 seconds to leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this on, I would greatly appreciate it. My goal is to get this education and information and knowledge out to as many girls as possible. I have this huge passion for wishing that I and other girls understood things about their bodies far earlier. We have so much time to maximize and to work on some of these things when we are younger, but a lot of us don't actually start caring or get the education for that until something goes wrong. So I would love for just girls of all ages, women of all ages, to find this education and to understand more about their brains, their bodies, their skin, their nutrition, their fueling from the top experts in their fields, which is why I started Wellness Fixes Spot. So I would greatly appreciate it if you could also leave a review. I also feel as smart, curious people, we're often smart and curious about other things outside of wellness. Wellness is my domain. I am a physical therapist. I've had decades of clinical experience and education and opportunities that have allowed me to learn and fall in love with the human body, and especially sharing this knowledge with you guys. But I understand that I am not the expert in everything, and I like learning about other things and other industries outside my own. So that's what the Smart Girl newspaper is for. It's every week on Wednesdays. I curate a list of things that are positive, fun, uplifting, that maybe provoke conversations about industries outside of our own. Because as women, we're multifaceted and we have interests well outside of the one podcast you might listen to every week. So if you're interested in things outside of health and wellness as well, and are curious about marketing and finance and consumerism and entrepreneurship and business and mental health and so many other industries, it's really just a way for me to compile different articles and podcasts and videos that I find very interesting and send it out to you guys so that we're all able to learn together. So a little recap of this episode. 1, under pressure, your amygdala pulls the fire alarm, sounding the danger signals. And your prefrontal cortex, that place where decisions and plans and execution and working memory is stored, goes a little more quiet. We can name it when this happens to take back a little bit of that power. 2, choking is a working memory glitch, not a talent or skill issue. So aim your attention at one external cue instead of overthinking it internally. 3, women's stress hormone leans on oxytocin and estrogen, which means we are naturally wired for connection. So build your pressure people, your pressure group chat, and use them before the big moment. Next episode, we'll build the toolkit. We'll talk about the science behind things like meditation, movement, exercise, prayer, superstitions, all of the things that people might utilize to help them under pressure. The stuff that can actually rewire how you show up when it counts. Thank you guys for joining me as we all learn how our brains and bodies handle performing under pressure. And I'll see you guys on the next episode where we actually start to build the toolkit to better help all of us perform under pressure.